Good evening. Welcome to another version of Hit and Run by R.L. Stine. I'm your host, Ruben Shoup. I am a YA horror author of the book Vampire Juice. So now let's begin chapter 13 of Hit and Run. Cassie figures it out. The photograph slipped from Cassie's hand, fluttered off the stoop. Scott and Eddie both grabbed for it. Then Eddie dived off the stoop and scooped it up from the grass. Even though it was no longer in her hand, Cassie still saw the horrifying image. It was an image she knew she would never be able to forget. The Polaroid showed Scott's. I'll just recap right here. There's an envelope on the front door, and they open the envelope, and there's a Polaroid. So, okay. The Polaroid showed Scott's parents' car, the silver Volvo. The photo had been snapped to show the driver's side of the car. She knew it was Scott's silver Volvo because of the dark scratch on the driver's door. Sitting behind the wheel, his head turned to face the camera, was Brant Tinkers, the corpse, smiling at the camera. Sitting behind the wheel of Scott's parents' car, so clear. The picture was so clear. You could see the corpse's eyes were sunk back in its head. You could see the purple tinge of its skin, the dark, unnaturally dark lips, the blank, unseeing stare as it faced the camera, sitting behind the wheel of Scott's car. Scott. Cassie stared at Scott, who was trembling under his big parka, beads of perspiration on his forehead, his features drawn back into disbelief, in utter bewilderment, as he stared at the photo, holding it close to his face with a trembling hand. Oh, I guess I'm not in the camera. I don't get it, Scott said, his voice hoarse. I don't get it. He raised his eyes to Cassie. This is impossible, he told her. Cassie thought Scott's new Polaroid camera, the one they had teased him about. I don't know how this happened, Scott said suddenly, realizing that both of his companions were staring at him. Really? I have no idea. Cassie believed him. She threw her arms around him, holding tight to the parka, to show him that she did. We have to get you home, she said softly. Your face is so flushed. You're burning up. He's going to kill us all, Eddie muttered, still staring at the Polaroid, holding it close to his face, under the porch light. The corpse. He's going to kill us. Eddie, stop, Cassie cried. Well, who took this picture? Eddie demanded. Staring at Scott, how did the corpse get in Scott's car? I don't know, Scott said weakly. I'm telling you, Eddie, I don't know. Suddenly, the front door opened, startling all three of them. Eddie gasped and shoved the Polaroid into his vest pocket. Mr. Katz pushed open the storm door. What are you doing out there? You'll freeze your buns off. Are you coming in or not? No thanks, Cassie said quickly. She took Scott's arm and tugged it. Come on. Got to get you home. Eddie cast her pleading stare as if begging her not to leave. But enough was enough, Cassie decided. She wanted to get poor sick Scott home. He seemed nearly dazed as she led him to the curb, and she wanted to get home where she could think about everything quietly by herself. Half an hour later, after depositing Scott like a heavy bag of laundry at his doorstep, saying good night to her parents, who were dozing off in the den With Saturday Night Live blaring on the TV, Cassie tucked herself into bed, turned off the bed table lamp, and settled down on her pillow to think. Staring up at the shifting shadows on the ceiling, like dark, playful ghosts over her head, she tried to put things in order, tried to keep back and see things clearly. But as much as she tried, her thoughts swirled about, much like the shadows she was staring at. One picture blurred into another, none of them as clear as the horrifying Polaroid of the corpse in the car. Scott's car. Scott's Polaroid? No. There were too many ugly pictures, too many ugly questions. Who had mowed Winks down? Who was trying to terrify them? It couldn't be Scott. He was a big, lovable teddy bear. He wouldn't hurt a fly. It couldn't be Eddie. He was too frightened, too scared of his own shadow to pull anything this horrible. And of course, it couldn't be Winks, so it had to be someone else, someone who knew them, someone they knew, someone who knew what had happened. The corpse? Cassie swallowed hard. The corpse was the only other person who knew what had happened. The dead man, Brant Tinkers. There he was, crossing the highway. When they hit him, there he was again. She saw his staring face caught in the headlights of the silver Volvo. The corpse. The only one who knows, before she realized it, Cassie had drifted off into a restless sleep. A while later, she awoke suddenly, bathed in perspiration, the bedclothes twisted around her waist. Glancing at the bed table clock, she saw that it was a little past 3:30 in the morning. The ghostly shadows still swirled above her head. Pale moonlight filtered in through the curtains on her window. Only half awake, Cassie sat up and took a deep breath, and realized that she had figured it out. She knew who was doing this to them. So who is doing this to them? Knowing R.L. Stine, this is some kind of prank. We have to read in between the lines. That is my thinking. Oh, sorry about that. That's my son's 360. He's getting off work too. I just got off work. He works at Lowe's. Okay, now, I wonder, because years ago, I saw a short film when we were taking driver's ed about someone killing someone and portraying how they felt. So I wonder if this is the parents. I really wonder. Okay. A visit to the morgue. Before breakfast Sunday morning, Cassie called the hospital after being transferred to 3 different nursing stations. She was told that Winks was still in stable condition, but that he hadn't regained consciousness. No change from the night before. Was that good news or bad news? Cassie wished there were a doctor in her family, someone she could talk about Winks, someone who could reassure her that he was going to be okay. Still in her nightgown. I keep drifting over, don't I? Maybe if I scoot this over like this. All right. Is that better? Maybe it is. Cassie, still in her nightgown and robe, she punched Scott's number. His mother answered and said that Scott was too sick to talk. His temperature was 102 degrees, and he had terrible laryngitis. so he could barely make a sound. He had gone back to sleep, his mother said. She added that she'd probably keep him out of school the next day. Cassie got dressed, pulling on her long-sleeved green top over a pair of gray sweatpants. Ooh, I guess she likes green. She pulled back the curtains and peered out the window. The sky was solid blue. The sun was shining. Across the street, 2 Finnegan kids were chasing the big Irish setter across their yard. A cheerful day, almost spring-like. She pulled open the window, wishing she felt more cheerful. She picked up the phone receiver and punched in Eddie's number. A busy signal. She sat on her bed, staring at the billowing white curtains, then tried again. This time Eddie picked up after the first ring. He had been trying to call the hospital, he told her, but hadn't been able to find out anything about Winks. Cassie told him what she had learned from the nurse. I guess no change is good news, Eddie said. I guess, Cassie replied. Listen, Eddie, does your cousin work Sundays? The question seemed to catch him by surprise. You mean Jerry? Yeah, Jerry. The one who works at the morgue. I think so, Eddie said. I could call him and find out. Why do you want to know? I have a theory, Cassie said casually. You don't think Jerry has anything to do with what's going on, do you? Eddie asked. Maybe, Cassie replied. He's the only other person who knows anything about the corpse, and he knows that you were interested in the corpse. But Jerry's a good guy, Eddie exclaimed heatedly. He wouldn't do anything like that. He wouldn't run down Winks, Jerry. Jerry likes Winks. Eddie, sure, Jerry likes to joke around sometimes, but you'd joke around too if you worked where he does. Eddie sounded very upset. Eddie, stop, Cassie cried. I'm not accusing your cousin of anything. He was the last person to see the corpse, right? Right, Eddie reluctantly agreed. So I just thought maybe we could talk to him. You mean go to the morgue? Eddie cried, his voice rising several octaves. You don't have to come if you don't want to, Cassie said. She didn't like the idea of going to the morgue either, but she had an idea that Jerry might know what was going on or be able to help them in some way. I'll call Jerry, Eddie said, and hung up quickly. Cassie pulled on her white Nikes and tied them tightly, then paced back and forth across the room, waiting for Eddie to call back. I'm right about Jerry, she thought, pausing to peer out the window. The 2 Finnegan kids were wrestling in a mud puddle near the curb. The Irish setter was sitting on his haunches watching the bout. Jerry knows something. Jerry has something to do with this. Jerry is a bigger joker than Winks. The phone rang. She dived to the bed and picked it up before the first ring had ended. Hello? Hi, it's me. It's Jerry at work. Yeah, Eddie replied. Jerry said the dead people don't take Sunday off. What a riot, Cassie said sarcastically. Are you coming with me or not? You mean you're just going over there right now? Yeah, I'm taking the bus, she told him. You coming? I've got a lot of homework, he said. It won't take long, Cassie assured him. It's very cold in there, Eddie said, and there are dead bodies all over the place. Big surprise, it is a morgue, Cassie exclaimed, and laughed. She knew she shouldn't laugh at him, but he sounded like such a total coward. He was silent for a long time. Excuse me. Eddie, are you still there? I'll come with you, he said. Meet you at the bus stop. Cassie hung up and hurried down the stairs. Oh my God. going to take a quick drink. All right. Mom stopped her as she was heading out the front door. Hold on. Where are you going? She asked, pulling Cassie back by tugging on her red wool scarf. Just going to see Eddie, Cassie replied. Are you going to the hospital? Mrs. Martin asked, brushing Cassie's hair back off her forehead. Maybe later, Cassie replied. She had a sudden impulse to tell her mother she was going to the morgue. She had a sudden impulse to tell her mother everything, to ask for help, to allow her mother to wrap her up in a protective hug and hide her. Your dad thought you might like to practice your driving today, Mrs. Martin said, rearranging the scarf around Cassie's neck. My driving? Well, you are taking the driving exam after school tomorrow, Mrs. Martin exclaimed. Don't tell me you forgot. I thought you said it was the most important day in your life, still holding on to the scarf. My goodness. She stared suspiciously at Cassie. How could I have forgotten about my driver's test, Cassie thought. I've been so obsessed with Winks and the corpse and the horrid phone calls, I had completely forgot. Of course I didn't forget, Cassie lied. Tell Daddy I'll be home in a few hours. We can go driving then. She kissed her mom on the cheek and hurried out the door. Next day, Eddie said his hands shoved into his jeans, his black hair still wet from the shower. Cassie found him waiting for her on the corner, leaning against the blue and white bus pole. Nice day. Nice day to visit the morgue, Cassie said dryly, watching an enormous crow hop along the sidewalk and onto the grass. That's what? A buzzard? Eddie didn't laugh. Just trying to keep it light, she said. You want to go see Winks after the morgue? He asked, his eyes on the crow. Another crow, identical in size, glided down beside the first one. I don't know, she told him, looking up to see the dark blue bus approaching. My dad might take me driving. My test is tomorrow after school. I forgot all about it. Do you believe it? My test is Friday, Eddie said, his cheeks reddening. He bent down, picked up a flat gray stone from the curb, took aim and tossed it at one of the crows. The stone hit the ground hard, a few feet from the birds. They both squawked angrily and flapped into the nearest tree. The bus squealed to a halt. Cassie followed Eddie through the door. Try to squeeze in, the bus driver joked. The bus was completely empty. Cassie and Eddie walked all the way to the back. Friendly, huh? The driver called, watching them. In the big rear-view mirror, he pulled the bus away from the curb and headed toward the Civic Center. Have you ever been to the morgue before? Cassie asked, watching the houses and yards roll past the window. Yeah, once, Eddie said, resting his knees on the back of the seat in front of him. Jerry showed me around. I had bad dreams for a month. Oh, great, Cassie said, rolling her eyes. This is a stupid idea, Eddie said. Jerry isn't the one who ran down Winks. Jerry's just a goof. He isn't a killer. The bus turned on Civic Drive, its tires squealing. Up ahead, through the windshield, some of the tall new civic buildings, including the new state office tower, came into view. I just have this feeling we should talk to Jerry, Cassie said impatiently. I told you. I don't think he's a killer. Well, don't tell him too much, Eddie said, his expression serious, staring hard into her eyes. Huh? Why not? Cassie stared back at him. You know, Jerry, Eddie replied quietly. He makes a joke out of everything. Well, he won't joke about this, Cassie said. I mean, Winks is in the hospital, and the rest of us have been threatened and... Just don't tell him too much, Eddie repeated. They reached their stop. Eddie pulled the cord. Okay, sorry. My son is home. The bus pulled to the curb. Y'all come back now, you hear? The bus driver called. Cassie laughed as she stepped down to the curb. Guess he's pretty lonely, she said. Eddie's expression remained serious. I wish we weren't doing this, he said, staring up at the gray office building. Cassie ignored him and started walking. Is that it? Over there? She asked, pointing to a low brick building. The only old building among all the new skyscrapers. Yeah, Eddie said, hurrying to keep up. All right, give me a second. All right. He's off his motorcycle. All right. Eddie's expression remained serious. I wish we weren't doing this, he said, staring up at the gray office buildings. Cassie ignored him and started walking. Is that it over there? She asked, pointing to a low brick building. The only building among all the new skyscrapers. Yeah, Eddie said, hurrying to keep up. The new state office tower was made of enormous glass panels, and the glass reflected the sun back down the street. Cassie shielded her eyes with one hand to shut out the bright glare as she crossed the street. It's deserted here, Eddie said, turning to look in all directions. No one works here on Sunday, Cassie said, except Jerry, Eddie added. Etched in granite, black beside the broad wooden entrance were the words, City Morgue. 1952. Cassie tried the door, expecting it to be locked, but it pulled open easily. They stepped into a wide circular reception area, lit by one overhead light near the far wall. The reception desk, cluttered with papers and magazines, was unattended. I guess we can talk right back. We can walk right back, Eddie said, whispering for some reason. Jerry's area is way in the back, with the stiffs. He held back, allowing Cassie to lead the way. They walked through the empty reception area into a long, narrow corridor with closed doors on both sides. Look out, Cassie warned, stepping carefully through the dark, narrow hall. Hey, what's that? It was a stack of bloody bags made of heavy black plastic, piled in front of a closed office door. They're empty, Eddie said, sounding very relieved. Cassie shuddered. They look like garbage bags, only they zip up. The corridor led into a large open room the size of a small gymnasium. There were metal examining tables in the center of the room and what appeared to be a wide gray metal lockers built into all four walls. Hey, Jerry, Eddie called. His voice echoed against the walls. At least there are no bodies just lying around, Cassie said, now whispering too. What is that sour smell? She held her nose. Eddie looked green. Chemicals they use. Decaying bodies. It's all so disgusting. Light poured in from narrow windows up near the high ceiling. They stepped to the center of the room, their sneakers thudding loudly on the concrete floor. Hey, Jerry, where are you? Eddie called. Cassie stopped and uttered a shriek when she saw Jerry. She grabbed Eddie's hand and stepped back. Eddie saw him too. Jerry was lying on his back on one of the low examining tables. His arms were crossed on his chest. His eyes were wide open, unblinking, staring lifelessly up at the ceiling. His head was surrounded by a wide pool of dark red blood. Okay. So what do you think is going to happen? Oh my goodness. Okay. Oh, look at this. Zay joined. Hi. Okay. All right. Now, I'm just going to, let me take a drink. Okay, for those of you who are not caught up, I did do a recap of chapter 11 and 12 on YouTube. So if you just search my name, Ruben Shoop, it should pop up, or Hit and Run, Read Aloud. I think Ruben Shoop would be the easiest. All right. Not ticklish. Jerry, Eddie cried, and turned to Cassie, his face gripped with horror. This can't be happening, Cassie exclaimed, holding onto Eddie's arm, squeezing it hard without realizing it. What can't be happening? Jerry asked. He sat up, a wide grin crossing his face. Cassie gasped. Gotcha, Jerry said, and started to laugh. Cassie and Eddie didn't join in. Jerry, that wasn't funny, Eddie said, his voice just above a whisper. He sat down on the floor, his cheeks flushed. He looked about to faint. You really scared us, Cassie said angrily. Yeah, Jerry said, his grin growing even wider. He slid off the table and stood up. He held up the sheet of dark red cellophane that he had used for blood. Jerry was tall and broad-shouldered, built like a fullback. He had long, frizzy blonde hair that fell unbrushed around his round, usually grinning face. It was a mischievous face, Cassie thought. Jerry never looked serious. He had a diamond stud in one ear. He was wearing a faded blue work shirt, gray denim, straight-legged jeans over black cowboy-style boots. I really thought, Eddie started, but his voice caught in his throat, and he couldn't finish his sentence. He swallowed hard a couple of times, glaring angrily at Jerry. That was really unfair, Cassie said sharply. You knew we'd be scared coming here and everything. Yeah, Jerry repeated, still grinning, enjoying his triumph. Gotta keep a sense of humor around here, you know. Otherwise, things get pretty dead. He snickered at his own bad joke. Eddie, still sitting on the concrete floor, shook his head. So you guys want to see a corpse, huh? Jerry asked without warning. He reached over to one of the wall lockers and pulled the handle. Jerry, stop, Cassie pleaded. But she was too late. A wide drawer slid out. On it, only partially covered by a white sheet, was the nude body of an old man. Come on, man, put it away, Eddie screamed. Jerry giggled. That was stupid mosquitoes. Yuck! Cassie felt sick. The smell was overpowering. Jerry reached down to the dead man's feet. Tickle, tickle. He tickled the sole of one foot. Hey, not ticklish, he cried, turning to Cassie and Eddie. Here, want to try? Jerry, please, Cassie begged. Okay, Jerry said grudgingly. He shoved the drawer. It clanged shut, the sound echoing off the high ceilings. It smells so gross, Eddie said, slowly climbing to his feet. You get used to it, Jerry replied. It's not so bad after a while. He turned his attention to Eddie. You okay? Eddie still looked shaky. Eddie doesn't like my jokes, Jerry told Cassie. Gee, what a surprise, Cassie replied sarcastically. Jerry led them over to the desk in the corner. There were 3 wooden chairs lined up against the wall of lockers. They sat down. I heard about Winks, Jerry said, rubbing the back of his neck. How's he doing? Have you heard? He's still unconscious. Eddie said. I'm going over to the hospital later. Cassie added, the doctor says he's stable, whatever that means. Jerry tisk and shook his head. Did you get the guy who hit him? No, Cassie told him, but something's very strange. We want to ask you something, Eddie interrupted, casting an uncomfortable glance at Cassie about the corpse. The one that's missing, Cassie said. Yeah, wasn't that weird? Jerry shook his head again. He pushed his frizzy blonde hair back off his face. Do you know anything about the corpse? Cassie asked. Huh? Jerry said quickly, glancing at Eddie. You sure you're okay? Can I get you a glass of water? Or maybe some formaldehyde? He laughed, slapping his knees off his jeans. I'm okay, Eddie said quietly. His name is Brant Tinkers, right? Cassie was determined to pursue this. She was sure Jerry knew something that could help them. Yeah, and he was a businessman. That's all I know, Jerry said. I wasn't here when they brought him in. I don't know where he came from. He was in an accident or something. That's all I know. We know he was in an accident, Cassie thought. We killed him. Again, the scene of Route 12 played through her mind. The bump, the horrifying bump. The wide-eyed stare of surprise on Tinker's face. The corpse by the side of the road. Really, that's all I know, Jerry repeated. And then the stiff just disappeared. He was here when you called me, Eddie. Here 1 minute, then gone the next. Like he walked away, Eddie muttered. That's what you said, Jerry. You said it was like he walked away. Well, maybe I said that, Jerry replied, brushing back his hair again. But I saw the condition he was in. Believe me, Eddie, he was not ticklish. Not ticklish. There's no way that stiff could get up and walk out of here unless what? Cassie asked eagerly. Unless he's a zombie. Oh my goodness. What a turn. Now I'm excited, Jerry cried. The living dead. He whooped with laughter. That's not funny, Cassie said quietly. Let's go, Eddie urged her. Let's get out of here. Okay, my theory was a ghost. Now we have a zombie. Oh my goodness. You didn't see anyone come in here, Cassie demanded, ignoring Eddie. What about Tinker's family? Don't they want to know what happened to his body? What about the police? Jerry shrugged. He burped loudly. Sorry. Talking about stiffs always makes me hungry. Neither Cassie nor Eddie smiled. You guys are serious today. Guess you're upset about Winks, huh? Yeah, we're upset, Cassie said. Me too, Jerry said. But I don't see what it has to do with the missing stiff. I'll show you, Cassie said. She reached into her bag and pulled out a Polaroid snapshot. Hey, Eddie cried in surprise. You brought that? Cassie handed it to Jerry. Jerry squinted at it, studying it. That's a stiff, he cried. Where do you get this? It was left for us, Cassie told him. Someone wants us to think that Tinkers was driving the car that hit Winks. We've got to go, Eddie said, jumping to his feet. I feel really sick. I don't get it, Jerry said, staring hard at the snapshot. There was a note, Cassie told him. He said, 1 down, 3 to go. Whoa, Jerry said, his face filled with confusion. Eddie grabbed the photo from him. Come on, Cassie. He started toward the door. Cassie saw that Jerry had a very upset look on his face. Eddie, he called. Eddie, halfway across the large room, turned. Eddie? I'll call you later, Jerry said. He nodded to Cassie. See you. Tell Winks I'm pulling for him. Cassie followed Eddie out of the room and through the long, narrow corridor to the building. Oh, my goodness. I wonder what is going to happen next. The sour smell of death followed them into the street. They didn't say anything to each other until they had walked a couple of blocks, and the smell had begun to evaporate. Jerry looked upset. Cassie said thoughtfully, I think it's because he saw I was feeling really sick, Eddie said. No, I think it's more than that, Cassie replied. The sun was high in a cloudless sky. The air was crisp and cold. Cassie took a deep breath and then another. Sorry I had to get out of there so fast. I just couldn't stay another second, Eddie said as they crossed the street to the bus stop. I thought I was going to puke my guts out. That's okay, Cassie replied. She wasn't thinking about Eddie. She was thinking about Jerry. I think Jerry got upset when he saw the snapshot because he knows something. He's not telling us, she said. Eddie shrugged. He said he didn't know anything at all. I really don't think he does. When he calls you later, see what you can find out, Cassie instructed. Okay, Eddie said. His cheeks were red as usual, but he looked as if he was starting to revive. After lunch, Cassie practiced driving with her father. He seemed really nervous, even though she drove slowly and carefully, sitting beside her in the front passenger seat. He kept slamming his foot down as if he were applying a brake. I can relate. Boy, can I ever relate. My son, I'm teaching my son to drive, and we've been going parallel parking. His braking, it scares me. I keep telling him I'm taking my heart medicine every time we go driving. I think you're going to pass easily tomorrow, he said after she had successfully parallel parked twice without any trouble. You're just desperate to go home, she teased. He admitted that practicing with her made him a little nervous. Obligingly, she turned the wheel over to him. He dropped her off at the hospital. The news there was good. Mrs. Winkleman greeted Cassie in happy tears in her eyes. Winks was awake. He was still somewhat groggy, but he was awake. He had several broken ribs, a broken arm, and a sprained knee. Oh, sprained knee. Oh, those hurt. Aside from that, he seemed to be fine. He was going to be okay. That's wonderful, Cassie exclaimed, hugging Winks's mother joyfully. Winks wasn't allowed any visitors yet, so Cassie called her dad to come pick her up. He let her drive home. Cassie couldn't wait to call Scott and Eddie and tell them the good news about their friend. That night she tried to push away thoughts of the driver's test so that she could concentrate on her government textbook. It was a little after 11. Her parents had gone to bed early. She was the only one still up. Ooh, let's see what happens. She changed into her warmest, most comfortable nightgown and had just started reading the opening paragraph on the separation of powers when she heard the sound from outside. A scrabbling sound, a scraping, the squeak of a door. It sounded like the front porch door. She had noticed the squeak the day before when she and her dad spent the day out there sanding. Curious. Cassie ran to her bedroom window, pushed aside the curtains, and looked down. Oh. Someone in a dark coat was running across the front yard. She could only see the back as he disappeared into the shadows of the tall hedges. Gripped with fear, she stood staring down at the front yard for several seconds after the dark figure had disappeared. Then she reluctantly made her way down to the stairs, walking silently so as not to wake her parents. She hesitated at the front door and listened. She heard a scraping sound repeat itself again. Was he out there? Had he come back? No. She had seen him run away. He had definitely been on the porch. Most likely, he had left something there. Something frightening? Another ugly photograph. Another threatening note? She raised her hand to the doorknob. She unlocked the door. She stared to turn the knob, but then stopped. Should she open the door? So, what do you think? Should she open the door? I wonder. Now, it is suggested to me, because I was watching YouTube about this, about TikTok Live. So, if you can, follow me. Of course, I will follow you back. And I will give you, and if you click the dots at the top for notifications, you'll know when I go live. But of course, I will go live until we finish this book at 11, and then we'll have to do another one. Yes. All right. Where's Scott? This is chapter 16. Cassie clicked on the porch light, then, holding her breath, she pulled open the heavy wooden front door and stared out through the glass of the storm door. No one there. The porch was empty. But the scraping sound continued beyond the porch. Trees bowed and trembled in a strong gusting wind. Dead leaves rustled across the yard. Hesitantly, she pushed open the storm door. Her legs were shaking. She realized she still hadn't dared to breathe. She leaned forward into the rectangle of the yellow light, the scraping sound. She could see now what was causing it. A large brown oak leaf was caught in the porch screen. The wind kept creeping it against the screen. That is funny, because when you're at night, you hear all kinds of strange sounds. I know I did when I was a kid watching what was that? Vampire Circus in the cellar. I heard everything. Cassie finally breathed, exhaling noisily, a sigh of relief. But the relief lasted only until she saw a large brown envelope tucked into the porch door. She had been right. Whoever had been darting away into the shadows had left the envelope. Cassie peered out into the darkness, trying to make sure that he hadn't come back, that he wasn't lurking there by the side of the porch, waiting to grab her when she came out for the envelope. She didn't see anyone. The leaf scraped against the screen. The wind swirled. Letting go of the storm door handle, she dashed onto the porch, the cold floor against her bare feet, sending a chill up her entire body. She grabbed the envelope and tugged it out from the porch door and leaped back into the safety of the house. Holding the envelope under her arm, she silently closed the front door and carefully locked it. Then she tiptoed up the stairs to her room, shivering. the sound of the rustling wind, the scraping leaf, following her up the stairs. Shaking from the cold and from her fright, she climbed into bed, hoping to get warm there, holding the envelope in one hand, tugging the covers up excuse me, with the other. Then, with a trembling hand, she turned open the envelope. As she had imagined, it contained another Polaroid photo and another note. She gasped as she held the snapshot under her bed table lamp. There he was again, the corpse, wide-eyed corpse, posing for the camera. He was standing on Cassie's front porch. One hand was on the doorknob of the front door. He was here, Cassie realized, at my house, standing on my porch, standing at the door. And then I saw him run away, she said aloud. So he isn't dead, she realized. Brant Tinkers isn't dead. He's alive, and he's trying to terrify us. No, he is dead. We saw him. We saw his sunken eyes. I could smell that he was dead, she told herself. He was at the morgue. Dead, dead, dead. But then he left the morgue. The wild, unconnected thinking was leading nowhere. She closed her eyes and counted to 10. The note. She had forgotten to read the note. It was on a folded-up sheet of lined notebook paper. It didn't take long to read. It contained only 2 words, scrawled in crayon, block letters. You're next. She knew she wasn't thinking clearly, but she had to talk to someone. She was too scared to go to sleep, too scared to sit there shivering under the covers, seeing the corpse standing on her porch, seeing the 2 scrawled words, seeing the threat again and again. She couldn't tell her parents. Then they would have to be told everything, and how Cassie and her friends had taken Eddie's car and gone out driving without any licenses. How they had hit and killed Brant Tinkers and left him beside the road, desperate not to get into trouble. Trouble. Trouble seemed like such a weak word for what was going on. No, she couldn't tell her parents, even though she really wanted to. It wouldn't be fair to the others. So whom could she call? Eddie? No. She didn't want to frighten him more. He was already to the breaking point. Winks? No, of course not. She had to call Scott. She didn't care what time it was. She had to talk to him. Scott would calm her down. Scott would understand. Maybe she and Scott could come up with a plan. Maybe they could figure out what was going on. Her hand was shaking so violently. It took 3 tries to punch Scott's number. Sitting up in bed, she listened to the phone ring, gripping the top of the blanket tightly with her free hand. It rang 4 times before someone at Scott's house picked it up. Then it took a long while before the voice finally said, "Hello?" in a sleepy, fogged voice. It was Scott's mother. "I'm sorry to call so late," Mrs. Baldwin, Cassie said in a shrill voice she didn't recognize. "But can I talk to Scott? It's pretty important." "Who is this? Cassie?" Scott's mother wasn't entirely awake. "Yes. Could I please talk to him? I'm really sorry. But Cassie, he's asleep. His fever hasn't broken. Yes, please. Please wake him up. I just need to talk to him about something. Please," Cassie begged. The line was silent for a long time. All Cassie could hear was her own rapid breathing. "Well, I'll see if I can wake him," Mrs. Baldwin said finally. "Oh, thank you." Cassie heard the phone clank as if hitting the floor. Through the phone she heard footsteps, the groan of floorboards, the sound of Mrs. Baldwin going down the hall to wake Scott. It seemed to take forever. Cassie sat rigidly on her bed, her back against the hard floorboard, her hand still gripping the top of the blanket, the phone receiver pressed tightly to her ear. Finally she heard footsteps approaching the phone. Then the sound of someone fumbling for the receiver on the other end. "Cassie?" It was Mrs. Baldwin sounding, wide awake now, and very frightened. "Cassie, Scott isn't here. He's gone." Oh my goodness. What is going to happen next? All right. I am going to stop for now. Okay. I'd like to thank everyone for watching. And I will, if you missed any part, I will repost it on YouTube. And it'll be under chapter 12, I believe. That's what the title was. Anyhow, my name is Ruben Shoup. I am a YA horror author of the book Vampire Juice. Thank you for watching, and I will see you again tomorrow night.